can now make the best barbecue in Texas in your own backyard. Because Goldees BBQ sauce, all-purpose rub, and brisket rub is now available online.
Oh shoot! Goldees BBQ seasoning.
Goldees is best. Stuff like that. Ooh, best barbecue in Texas.
And I'm gonna show you how to use them on brisket, spare ribs, turkey breast, and beef ribs. So this brisket trim is gonna be a little bit different than my standard, but the main parts are still the same. So I'm still taking off the mohawk, which is this big lump of meat and fat that's on the fat cap, and I'm also taking off any big hunks of fat on this brisket. The big difference comes on the leaner side of the brisket, also known as the flat. So normally I would trim off a big part of the flat and make a swooping cut to make the brisket more aerodynamic so that it will cook as evenly as possible in my offset smoker. I usually do this because in my experience, the thinner parts of the brisket that are on this swoop cut usually tend to burn before the entire brisket is done. However, I was messaging back and forth with Johnny, aka Derby BBQ, one of the owners of Goldees, and he told me to keep the brisket long and just round out the edges. He explained that now that I know how to run a nice low and slow fire, that I don't have any more danger of burning the flat if I keep it long. So that's what I'm gonna be doing today. But if you're following along at home and you're not super confident in your fire management ability, then you can also just use my Brisket Junior method for trimming, and I'll have a tutorial linked in the description box so you can follow that. Anyways, so just off of the optics, this brisket is super long. It's like a glizzy brisket. It's like a Snoop Dogg brisket. So anyways, go ahead and take your Long John Silver brisket. Okay, enough. Grow up. Once the brisket is trimmed, I seasoned it with some coarse pepper and a good layer of Goldees brisket rub. And I'm cooking all of the meat today on my 250-gallon smoker because I'm following guidelines from Goldees BBQ and they use big offsets at their restaurant. But if you want to try any of these recipes at home, then feel free to use your oven or any cooker you have in your backyard. It'll still taste really good. Seriously. So once the coal bed is set in the firebox and before the cooker even gets up to temperature, I'm gonna immediately put the brisket on. And this is another tip that I got from Johnny, and all this is gonna do is make sure that we get a nice heavy smoke on the food right out of the gate. So I'm gonna do this for all 4 cuts of meat that I'm preparing in this video. So to start off this cook, I got the pit up to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm just gonna stay at this temperature until the brisket bark is completely set, and I can see that a lot of the moisture has released from the brisket. At this point, the brisket should be at about 170 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I increased the temperature of the smoker to 275 degrees Fahrenheit and finished the cook with no wrap. Once done, I wrapped it in foil and beef tallow and let it rest. All right, let's try a piece of the burnt end. Man, the texture on the bark is wild. It's so weird because it's like fatty, but kind of crispy. It's almost like a fatty pop rock or something. I can definitely taste the difference between the Goldees rub and Lawry's. Lawry's is a lot more saltier, and I'm getting a lot more like deeper, richer flavor from the Goldees rub versus using Lawry's. It may be the best brisket I've ever done. That is really good. Okay, so originally I bought 2 racks of ribs, one from Kroger and one from Walmart. And let me tell you, the rack of ribs from Walmart did me absolutely dirty. I opened up the package and the ribs literally had a hole in them. It looked like the butchers were trying out Mortal Kombat moves in the freezers. So I'm not going to be talking about these Smithy Field Walmart ribs anymore. As far as this video is concerned, I only bought 1 rack of ribs from Kroger. Now with that said, for this recipe, I am following a video from Derby BBQ in his Steal from Walmart series. So first of all, I trimmed the ribs to make them nice, symmetrical, and rounded out with no sharp edges. Then I just seasoned it with Goldees all-purpose rub. And because I didn't put any salt or coarse pepper on it, I went really heavy with the rub, as you can see. This way I can just taste the rub, the ribs, and the smoke so that the results will be clear for my review once they're done. Now seasoned, I put the ribs on the pit and put them closer to the firebox, where the temp will be closer to 275, once the smoker gets warmed up. And I'll just be cruising between 275 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit for the next few hours until we're ready for the next step. So about 4 to 5 hours later, the ribs are looking great, and I'm gonna check to see if they're ready for sauce. So my first test is just looking at the color and bark, and I can see that it looks nice, dry, and set. Next, I just feel around the ribs to make sure the collagen is broken down in the rib tips and all the fat has rendered on the top of the rib. And at that point, I know it's time for the sauce. So I'm using Goldees BBQ sauce, and just like Jerby did in his video, I cut the sauce with some apple cider vinegar, and then got the ribs sauced up and then wrapped them up in foil. Then I put the ribs back on the cooker for about 15 to 20 minutes because when I was saucing them, they still felt a little bit tight. But after that, these ribs are done.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and try this little end piece.
Oh my gosh. Crazy that this is just all-purpose rub. It has a bit of sweetness to it, a saltiness to it. Man, that pairs really well with pork. Like, it's one thing with brisket, right? Because like brisket's going to taste good, but like I can taste the difference this rub is making on these ribs. A little bit of spiciness. Man, this is just crazy. Okay, these are the best ribs I've ever made for sure. Okay, turkey time. So this is just a defrosted turkey breast that I picked up from Publix, and with Thanksgiving just around the corner, I am in desperate need of a turkey breast plug. Because let me tell you, after I made this specific turkey breast, everyone who tried it at the party now wants me to cook turkey breast for their Thanksgiving dinner. So help me out by letting me know in the comments where I can buy turkey breast in bulk at a good price. But anyways, I took my defrosted turkey breast and just cut off the weird, filmy, slimy white stuff. And then I cut off any hangy bits on the turkey breast to keep it nice and aerodynamic. And before I got the rub on it, I put some salt on it first to let it dry brine in the fridge for a couple of hours. After that, I coated this breast in some mayo. And FYI, I'm following one of Jerby BBQ's videos once again for this recipe, so you don't have to go out and search for each one of these videos. I'll have them all linked in the description so you can check them out there. Once coated, I just went over it with some Goldees all-purpose rub, and that's it. It's ready to smoke. So here's where I made a massive mistake. So my original plan was to cook this turkey breast like really low at like 225 degrees Fahrenheit, but what I forgot was that I was gonna cook all this food at the exact same time. So I ended up cooking this turkey breast at like 275 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and it finished cooking in like 2 hours. But like I mentioned before, the guests that I served this to absolutely loved it. And the reason for this is most definitely because of one of the later steps in this recipe. And don't worry, I'll get to it shortly. So once the internal hit around 155 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, I pulled it off the smoker and put it on some foil and put some beef tallow and some more of that Goldees all-purpose rub. Then I closed it up to rest and let the tallow melt. So Jerby BBQ actually used butter in his recipe, but unfortunately I found out way too late that I didn't have any butter, so I'm just using what I have. And now we've reached the stage of this recipe where the magic happens. So after slicing up the turkey breast, all of that melted tallow and seasoning at the bottom of the foil becomes a sauce that you dip the turkey breast in before you eat it.
And give it a try. Salty, but still savory from that beef tallow and butter we put on it. Turkey is nice and tender, and it also just absorbs so much smoke flavor. And that's just kind of how poultry is. Even though it's not in the smoke for a long time, it just does such a good job of absorbing smoke flavor. That is good.
Okay, so now we are on our very last cook, which is the beef short ribs. And this time for this recipe, I'm gonna be following a video from the Meat Church YouTube channel, where Johnny invited Matt Pittman over to Goldees to show him how they make dino beef ribs. However, for this cook, I don't have any dino ribs. I only have beef chuck ribs, which are similar to dino plate ribs, but they're slightly different. An easy way to compare them is that plate ribs are to brisket what chuck ribs are to chuck roast. And a simple way to tell them apart is that typically chuck ribs have 4 bones and dino ribs have 3. But because of these differences, I'm gonna be modifying Johnny's recipe slightly for these chuck ribs. So in the Meat Church video, Johnny just rounded out the corners of the ribs and the trimming was done. And for my rack of chuck ribs, I'm still going to be rounding them out, but there's just so much fat and connective tissue that I have to take down first. So I went ahead and trimmed that down so that the fat would be able to render by the end of the cook. With that done, I used some teriyaki sauce as a binder, and then I mixed together together some Goldees brisket rub and some beef bouillon. And man, that beef bouillon was way harder than I thought. I was trying to crush it with my fingers first like a dummy, and then I just ended up slicing it with a knife to crush it down and then combined it with the brisket rub. Then I just put a nice coat over the beef ribs and then onto the smoker. I cooked them at about 275 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit for the entire cook. And that's it. There's no need to wrap during this cook, and we're just trying to get as much heat and smoke onto these ribs so that we can render down that fat and get a nice crispy bark on top. And after about 7 to 8 hours, I check to see if they're done by lifting them up and flexing them. And once they're bending like this, I know they're ready. So I wrapped them in foil and beef tallow to rest, and all that's left to do is to see how they turned out.
All right, let me try a piece of this. Just nab a piece off the end of this rib. Oh yeah. Even though these are chuck ribs and not plate ribs, it's like brisket on a stick. Great texture. And again, the brisket rub just tastes really good on beef. The fat is just so nice and rendered. It just melts in your mouth. This is so good.
So I've been using these sauces and rubs over the last few months and I love them. So make sure you check out Goldees' website in my description box and buy some before they sell out, because I'm not kidding, these are so good. And if you want to know more about Goldees BBQ, the #1 barbecue joint in Texas, then make sure to watch the next video on your screen where I give some insight on Alvin Joe's documentary on Goldees, and I'll see you guys over there.